And
Yeah.
like, I'm sympathetic to the idea that the search market is what it is. No one else is going to win other than Google. My point
Mhm.
here is about the AI market, which there's a tension between, is AI a part of search? On one hand, yes, but also it's also something new and different. And the reality is that Gemini has an advantage over the other LLMs because it has privileged access to Google search and this sort of grounding API that if you like, OpenAI does not have access to that because they're not running on Vertex.
Yeah.
So like if OpenAI wants to ground, by ground I mean like where you do a reg search and you check to make sure what you're saying is correct. Like, so basically like verification. Gemini checks with Google basically via a privileged API that is very performant, super optimized for this use case to make sure that what it says is correct. Now, whether it works is, a matter of debate, but the concept, I think, should be clear. OpenAI does not have access to that. So they're grounded on Bing, which is not as good. And so if you're worried, if you hold
If you're
that Google is a
contemplating
monopoly,
the future, then you should account for that sort of discrepancy. Is that right?
yeah, well, I mean, if you're going to state in your opinion that if you're going to rule that it's a monopoly, and you're going to state in your opinion that it's important a company not be able to leverage monopoly into dominating future markets, then there was a very clear thing to do to avoid that, which is making sure that all AI models have that Google has to open the API to this grounding and not just have it available via Vertex. Like, so I'm more sort of offended by the inconsistency here.
That's exactly how I feel. It's just the logic, the internal logic of the opinion does not pencil
totally
out.
lacking. It's totally lacking.
I don't think this is the most important issue in the world, but if you're reading it, it's like, okay, well, you said this and you're doing this. You said this and you're doing this. It's like, what the hell happened here? Have you spent 12 months just twisting yourself in knots? I just can't believe this is where we netted out, but such is life. Congrats to Google and Apple.
I mean, you can make, and I think the biggest defense of the judge's argument is sort of what you complained to him about. It's very pragmatic. It's sort of like, under precedent, I had to find Google guilty, but the reality is the way markets work, what they're doing is fine. I'm opposed, companies should be able
Sharp
to free
loves
ride.
Firefox. He's keeping it alive, one search at a time. Yep.
And like, that's kind of what this opinion is. It's basically, I had to find them guilty, but I just really don't want to screw with things. And there's a part of me that is, okay, that's fine. like just don't like, at the end of the day, the likelihood of a court or government screwing up a market is also very high. I've become much more concerned about that and reticent. Like, I think the antitrust movement has really harmed Silicon Valley with this acquisition mess. Like, so that is like because of that, like, I'm like, as a logician, I don't know if that's a word, as someone that likes to be internally consistent, I'm offended at the lack of logic and internal consistency in this ruling.
Yeah.
But as my pragmatist streak has sort of increased, and overall skepticism of, look, government's just going to make it worse, which is directly downstream from the acquisition sort of problems that we've talked about, I'm much more okay with it and sympathetic, like, whatever,
shrug
it is
of
what
the
it is.
shoulders.
Yeah. So,
the outcome
and the reality is,
fine.
like,
everyone's gonna live.
AI is competing with Google. ChatGPT is a threat to Google. There should be some humility on the anti-monopolist front, just like TikTok really came in against Facebook. It's like, this isn't an AT&T 50, 60, 70 year monopoly here. These are lasting like 5, 10, maybe 15 years, but like the market is doing things. It is responding. And so, like you, like, I'm offended from an intellectual standpoint, but from a pragmatic standpoint, whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a fan of Apple TV Plus and some of the offerings that they've had over the last couple of years, I'm happy that the services revenue at Apple is not going to be interrupted one bit, and we'll keep getting great.
Well, maybe they don't need a
fig.
Maybe they don't need a fig leaf anymore to pretend that they're Apple services for
exactly,
these TV shows, because now it's totally illegal. So sorry, your Apple TV shows might get cut now.
Oh, well, we'll see. I hope not. Those shows are actually, they're all solid B pluses, which is what I'm looking for. Don't make me think too hard. Apple doesn't make you think too hard. Just get a couple big names and put a good story together, and we're set. The three laments that I have in the wake of this ruling as the resident anti-monopolist, like you and I, we've been cheerleading Google over the past couple of months. I do think it's easy to lose sight of how much worse the core Google search product has become over the last 10 years. And that has been a suboptimal outcome for consumers, and one that's arguably pretty correlated to Google's distribution agreements and the complete lack of oxygen for any Google competitors throughout that time. And they're now going to continue to have that advantage going forward. And then as superior search products emerge from the AI ecosystem, like a healthy free market would reward those competitors. But it's now going to be even harder for like a company like ChatGPT. A lot of people love ChatGPT, but it's going to be harder for them to crack into the market share of Google, because a company like Apple is incentivized to keep pushing Google to its massive user base. And yeah, there are going to be some users who change the default, but and if like OpenAI were available as a default in future iPhones, but the percentage of users that Google loses in that scenario is going to be much smaller than it would have been if these deals had been banned. And then the final lament, again, this isn't the end of the world, but and this is harder to articulate in a concrete way, but like part of the value of strong antitrust action is deterring future anti-competitive behavior from the biggest companies in the world. Like Microsoft in the 2000s was constrained by the consent decree, but also by the fear of drawing even more antitrust scrutiny during that period. And even Google itself went to the DOJ in the mid 2000s to protest some of what Microsoft was doing with its own defaults. And in this case, the court, like the conduct that the court found illegal is also the conduct that became so integral to the tech economy that the judge thought it would have been reckless to prevent Google from continuing all of those relationships. And they're basically being rewarded for their anti-competitive strategy. They're certainly not being punished for it, right? And so
no, this is the paradox in the ruling. Google is not being meaningfully sanctioned because the deals they cut that were ruled illegal funneled so many people, so much money to other people.
And it's a real setback to the idea that antitrust serves as a check on those sorts of behaviors that distort the free market. Like if you're a company paying attention to this case, the lesson is that it's just better to behave anti-competitively and ask for forgiveness than actually be conscious of conduct that could lead to an antitrust lawsuit. Like that's sort of the takeaway.
Yeah, but that's probably always been the reality, to be honest. I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, there's almost like a two-part thing. It's like, okay, you might be found guilty, but the punishment will be not important. So it's not like a guilty plea is not the end of or a guilty finding is not the end of the world. You have another round to fight.
Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. And so I think what you're saying is valid. I'm not dismissing it. I'm skeptical that any of these companies would do different than what they did, because when they did it, they weren't thinking about, no one actually, they did it because it made good business sense, and like the incentives sort of line up in that regard. Maybe this does end up sort of spurring more sort of patronage. You could argue that Facebook should have been more generous with publishers back in the 2010s. I think I argued that on Streckery at the time. They should have been paying folks off to a much greater extent. Apple should be more generous with developers. And that to me is the big takeaway. Google, and it always confused everyone. They just couldn't do and it's I'm going to add it to my admiration list for Google, like that I've been coming around to, the loosey goosey. We don't really do things that make total sense, but
Google,
that
they're
actually
smarter than they look, man.
No,
Yeah.
Google's lack of optimization. This is another example. I got so much pushback on this when I argue that Google's dominance was I don't want to say natural, but like that it was driven by demand and aggregation what consumers wanted. And what these anti-monopolists came back at me again and again and again was basically saying, then why do they pay? And the reason that this is why it's not just that they don't have competitors. It's that their competitors throw themselves on the altar to defend Google's right to be a monopoly. Like Apple was in that courtroom begging for this to stay in place.
I was going to say,
Firefox
Eddie
was in
Q
this courtroom
was in the
begging
courtroom
for it to stay in place.
testifying about how good AI products have become and Apple might go in that direction. So he was definitely lending credence to the narrative that the judge ultimately bought in this case.
Google bought off the entire industry.
Yeah.
Like, and not in a corrupt sort of like, just in a like a normal course of business sort of way. And
I scratch your back, you scratch mine, Apple. Yeah.
Well, and not just that, but it's like I'll scratch your back 10x, and you and
you stay out of this industry and allow us to continue to dominate. And I mean,
and by the way, like I said, it's not just a short, medium term thing; it's a long term thing. Like in the long run, it's not just that Google could benefit from Apple being a customer and the scale they get and the money they make. It's like Apple is withering in terms of innovation, in terms of like if Apple had been competing with Google in search for the last decade, there wouldn't be a question about them investing in AI today. They would already be there. They would have been doing it. They would be viewing it as existential because they have a revenue stream in search that is threatened by AI. By keeping Apple on the sidelines for the last decade, they've basically guaranteed Apple's on the sidelines indefinitely. And if you're Google, that's worth way more than $20 billion a year. Yeah, exactly. Google's existential threat is competition, and they foreclose competition, and the judge is like, it's really important we not have competition going forward.
It is really the lack of intellectual consistency from what he held last year to what he ruled this year.
What he wrote in the opinion, like the whole opening of this is like laying out these antitrust principles, and then like the rest of the opinion is just sort of like in defiance of them.
Yeah.